everyone. Hope you're all out there enjoying the gorgeous summer weather we've been having. It's in the 80s, it's sunny, it's lovely out, and it's just a nice kind of summer moment out there today. I know these past few months have presented a lot of unique challenges and hardships for all of us, and there have been some blessings, definitely, some obvious blessings and some blessings in disguise, like appreciating the little things more, or the things that used to be on autopilot in our brains, or even appreciating the people and the relationships in our life more, the people that we now have been separated from for a while, but are hoping to get to see soon, to really just have an appreciation for the community that we are a part of. But for a lot of people, it's hard to see those blessings when they come on the heels of so much despair, all the illness and the job loss and the loss of celebrations like graduations or parties or vacations that people had planned. Those things have been really weighing on a lot of people's hearts, and so it's kind of hard to see the blessings when we're dealing with all of that. And I know that we're all anxious for things to kind of open up, and as we begin to open up more and more of our society, and we're trying to figure out how to do that safely, and with church returning to public worship on Sunday, and we're trying to figure out how to do that safely, then I think it's so appropriate that this Sunday is Pentecost, where we get to celebrate the arrival of the Holy Spirit. We are at a unique moment in history where we need the power of God's Spirit more than ever before. And so I love looking at Pentecost in light of everything that we have happening now. We know that Jesus spent about 40 days with his disciples after he rose from the dead, before he ascended into heaven. And during that time, he taught them all about the meaning behind what had happened at Easter and made sure they understand what their mission was going forward. And he also talked to them about the arrival of God's Holy Spirit. And he promised them that when he left, he would be sending this Spirit of truth to be with the believers. So Pentecost, the word Pentecost actually means 50th, and it's 50 days after Passover that Pentecost takes place. And the disciples are all in Jerusalem. Jesus told them to wait there. And they're celebrating the Feast of Weeks. And the Feast of Weeks was kind of like a harvest festival where they celebrated the first fruits of their harvest. And at that time, there were Jewish people from all over the world living in Jerusalem. So dozens of different, languages, nationalities being represented there, and they're all celebrating this festival. And Acts 2 tells us that the believers were all in the same place. And I'm going to read you a quote from Acts 2, starting in verse 2, and it says that a sound from heaven, like the roaring of a mighty windstorm, filled the house where they were sitting. Then what looked like flames or tongues of fire appeared and settled on each of them. And everyone present was filled with the Holy Spirit and began speaking other languages as the Holy Spirit gave them this ability. So when that loud, crashing windstorm noise comes in, all of the people who were there celebrating the festival all kind of rushed over to see what had happened. And there were thousands and thousands of people because this festival was a big deal. And the crowd was kind of split on what they were thinking of it. They realized they could all understand the language that the Galileans were speaking. And so about half of them were like, this is amazing, it's a miracle. We're hearing about all of the great things God has done in a language we can understand. And the other half were like, I think the disciples are drunk. And so Peter takes that opportunity to stand up and say, no, it's only 9 a.m, too early for drinking, we're not drunk. And then he goes into the explanation of what's happening. And he presents the gospel to this crowd, and it's so powerful because Peter is not speaking of his own power, but he's preaching in the very power of God's Holy Spirit. And he really kind of solidifies his position as the rock of the church in this moment. And over 3,000 believers join the church that day. They become believers in what has happened, in this good news in the gospel, because of the power of that sermon that Peter preached through the Holy Spirit. And so you think about what would have happened if Peter had not stood up, if he had not used the power of God's Holy Spirit in that moment. They might have gone on thinking that the disciples had just hit the bottle a little early that day. But because Peter took action, because he decided to do what was needed to be done in that moment, then he was able to win 3,000 hearts and minds for the church, which is an incredible thing. And we all have access to this power, to the power of God's Holy Spirit. And especially in this time, we really need to be sure that we are trying to be the presence of God's peace and goodness and light and love in the world. And we have such a unique opportunity to set an example as believers. If we really come together, we can make a huge difference. If we band together and decide that we are going to do the things that we need to do to be our brother's keeper, to keep each other safe. We have scientific experts telling us some of the things that we can do that are really easy, like wear masks, try to stay 6 feet apart. And if we can do those things, then we can set an example for the rest of community that this is something we truly believe is important and worthwhile. So I love that this Sunday is Pentecost, and it's a wonderful thing to celebrate the presence of God's Holy Spirit in our life. And when have we ever needed the power of God's Holy Spirit more than we do right now, right? We need God's Holy Spirit in this time, as we do in all times, but I feel like especially now, as we begin to open things back up, and we're trying to be safe, but we're also itching just to get back out there and to have a little sense of normalcy back in our lives. And I know that a lot of us are still, sad or disappointed or mad about the way things are going, and those are all perfectly normal things to feel, and it's totally okay to feel those. We want to be true to the way that we're feeling. But I also encourage you to lift those things to God, or to talk with them, talk about them with a friend or with a professional if you need to, so that those things don't fester. Our mental and our spiritual well-being is just as important as our physical well-being, because we are a whole person, inside and out. So although we all have access to the power of God's Holy Spirit, it's up to us to use it. And that's what I encourage you to really be conscious of this week, is how we can be that force of God's goodness and light in the coming weeks as things open up, and to have a little bit of extra grace with each other as we're all kind of in the midst of that frustration of things not being exactly what we hope for them to be. So I hope to see you guys all again soon. We will have youth fellowship via Zoom on Sunday, and there'll be a devotional to unpack a little bit more about Pentecost on Sunday as well. All that info is in your emails that you get and on our website. All right, bye guys.